The 14th, 1989, Valentine's Day, and we're having an interview in Columbus, Ohio, with a former member and associate of the Church of Scientology. And what I'd like to ask, first of all, is for you to identify yourself and to let us know something about your experience in the group, maybe as specifically as you care to get.
All right. My name is Monica Pignotti, and I'm a survivor of Scientology and the Sea Organization. I was involved for 6 years, between the years of 1970 to 1976. When I first joined, I was in my freshman year of college. I was 18 years old, just barely 18 years old.
Okay. You joined where?
It was in Salt Lake City, Utah. There was a mission there. In Scientology, the missions are the places where the public are brought in that deliver the lower levels of auditing.
What kind of things attracted you to Scientology?
Well, first of all, I was away at college. I was a freshman, and I had always had a lot of concern about the situation in the world, wanting to make things better, wanting to really make a difference. I was also emotionally vulnerable, being in a new place. I had some questions about what I wanted to do with my life. I was a music major, but I was considering other careers, thinking about what I really wanted to do, and I felt I hadn't really found something that would really fulfill me yet. I was exploring psychology, but I was very unimpressed with the course I was taking, which was strictly behaviorist in orientation. It was an introductory course, and so I started to explore other areas. And I had a friend in the music department who was a student of somebody who was involved in Scientology, and she had taken one course, I believe. And she started talking about it with me. This was at the beginning of my freshman year, actually, when I first came to Salt Lake City. I was 17 then. And I heard about it from time to time. It was something that I was curious about. I wondered, because I was a very curious person. I still am. I'll read anything. Now I know how to look out for mind control. But I read the Dianetics book, first actually in December of 1970. She took me to a lecture. This was shortly before my 18th birthday. And there was nothing profoundly earth-shattering in the lecture, but everybody just seemed so intense. They seemed to really be fulfilled. They seemed happy. There were a lot of creative people there.
Did you see yourself as intense? You talk about that everyone seemed intense. Was that a turn-off or was that a turn-on?
It was a turn-on, because I wanted something. I wanted to find something that I could feel that way about it. I wanted a commitment, really, where I could really commit myself to a cause, somewhere where I could really feel I was making an effective difference, because I saw a lot of problems in the world, people getting killed in Vietnam, just all the problems that were going on, and I wanted to find a way.
Okay. So how long were you involved with the group in Utah before you moved to some other area?
I was there for 2 years off and on. What happened was I got more and more involved. I took the communications course, and it was so new and so different from anything I had ever done. We did what is known as TRs. That's been talked about in other places, so I won't go into too much detail on that.
Okay.
But we did study techniques, that kind of stuff. And I got more and more interested, especially the idea of being an auditor attracted me, and receiving auditing. That really drew me in. I think auditing is the bait for a lot of people for various reasons, because they'll find your ruin, whatever it is that you want. And what I wanted really was a purpose in my life to have some meaning, to make a difference. And I felt that by being an auditor, well, first of all, as you know, Hubbard makes outrageous claims about auditing. And to clear, I kept hearing this phrase, clear the planet, meaning to create a word.
Why do you say that's outrageous?
Well, because Hubbard said that auditing could create a world free of insanity, free of war, that auditing would really solve the world's problems. And it's a very complex doctrine in Scientology. There's a lot going on, and I really got caught up in it.
How do you know that his plan wouldn't work?
How do I know now?
Yeah.
Because Scientology uses mind control techniques, and it completely obliterates the individual, and I personally experienced that. And any group that uses those techniques to achieve those ends will never achieve those ends.
Well, to say that someone uses mind control, that in itself seems a bit outrageous. And I wonder how you came to that kind of conclusion.
Well, I didn't know for a long time that that's what was happening. I left the group 12 years ago, and it was only really a few months ago that I really started to understand what was going on.
So you were in a total of how long?
I was in for 6 years, and I've been out for 12. Actually, more like 13, like 12 and a half now.
12 and a half years. And
1976 I left.
During that 12 and a half years, has life been fairly good and productive for you, or have you had
Since then?
I mean, during that 12 years and a half that you've been out,
That I've been out.
have you had to face any kind of transitional problems?
Oh, sure. I feel like I was functioning, until I really found out what was going on with me, I was functioning at a small fraction of my full potential. I was holding myself back from being successful. I did get through college, but I had a lot of trouble in relationships with men. It took me 4 years to be able to date for reasons I'll go into later.
Okay.
And now I'm involved in a relationship, but it took a really long time.
So, do you attribute this problem in transition to your involvement with the Church of Scientology?
Definitely.
Can you maybe talk about that and maybe some of the things that you see at this point that contributed to that?
Sure. I think as I tell my story, it'll become clear, because it's really in going through the whole process that I went through that it'll become clear why I had the problems.
Okay. Where would you like to begin?
Well, I'll begin just with my involvement in the courses I started taking.
Okay.
And I had a very strong goal to become an auditor. Auditing, the whole idea fascinated me, because Scientology really misrepresented itself to me as being very individualistic, the road to freedom, anti-authoritarian. It said that you should see for yourself what is true and not listen to any authority, but really understand for yourself and look into your own mind. And he said the answers all lie within us. And auditing is a process, the way I saw it then, designed to give a person the ability to get answers from oneself rather than from an outside authority, and to be able to look at different possibilities, different options. A question is asked. It's a very simple process, really. The question is asked to the person, and the person looks into his mind, the pre-clear, and comes up with answers and different possibilities, and you keep looking at the question, you keep looking at the question, and you see different possibilities, you expand. Now, in reality, at the upper levels, Scientology is not like that. The wins I've found in my own experience and other people's too, that the wins that people get, the gains in the beginning, don't occur at the upper levels. All the outrageous promises, return of full self-determinism, cause over mental matter, energy, space, and time, all that. The upper levels are merely, as far as I'm concerned, OT3 is a figment of a very sick mind, very sick psychotic fantasy. Somebody who's a very clever science fiction writer, definitely. I don't think I could have thought that kind of stuff up. But what started out as something that I saw as very beautiful and something that could do people a lot of good turned out just to be devastating. And, well, it wasn't only the auditing, but it was the whole oppressive way the group was being run. It was anything but individualistic. It was anything but giving a person self-determinism. It was completely authoritarian. When Hubbard said don't answer to authority, he meant don't answer to any authority but me. That you had to go strictly. Even from the beginning, there were things that I missed because I just wasn't thinking critically. Like on the courses, they tell you not to ask questions. The supervisor on courses is instructed not to answer your questions, to only refer you to policy. No verbal data allowed. So basically, you're accepting this information. I was just reading a lot of bulletins, listening to a lot of tapes, and making every effort to understand them, but not to evaluate the ideas critically. Even though Hubbard said, look and see if it's really true. The assumption in Scientology is if you disagree with something, you don't understand it. So I was training to be an auditor, and it was all new, totally new things. I was very excited. My first 2 years, I have to say, I was basically very happy. I was very high.
So would you call that sort of a honeymoon experience?
Yeah, it was a honeymoon phase. Really, I was like somebody who had taken a drug. I was getting more and more under the influence of the mind control techniques. I was learning loaded language.
Mm-hmm.
I was being painted a very dreary picture of the world outside of Scientology, so I wanted less and less to be a part of it. Within 2 months, I had dropped out of college, which really upset my parents, who tried to intervene but had no professional help. It was 1971 at the time, and there was just no information on how to counsel people out of cults.
Mm-hmm.
And so my parents did the best they could. They went to the library, did research. My mother brought me a book about Scientology written by Paulette Cooper, which is turned out to be a very famous case called The Scandal of Scientology.
Was that going on while you were in the group?
The harassment of Paulette Cooper?
Yes.
Yes, a lot of it was. I wasn't aware at all what was going on, but at the time I would have participated in it because I was so brainwashed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would have done anything.
So you had no idea of what they were doing to her, or that she was doing anything to the church, or were you?
No, I was never associated with the guardian's office. I was an auditor.
Mm-hmm.
I was strictly into the tech. I was at the upper echelon of the tech because I was on flag with Hubbard himself. I audited personally under David Mayo, who was senior case supervisor at the time. Mm. And I achieved the status of flag class 6. Class 7, actually, I did that course too, and I read materials for class 8 course. But to get back to where I was during those 2 years before I joined the Sea Org, first of all, I didn't join the Sea Org right away, even though I was very excited and wanted to join. I didn't join because I saw deplorable living conditions, and I saw that with people that didn't have training, they said they give you all your training for free, but I saw that people weren't getting it. Mm-hmm. And I really wanted to be an auditor, and so I decided I would pay for the courses myself. And so I just did whatever I had to do to get the money. I begged, borrowed, whatever. I got it from my parents.
Mm-hmm.
I went on food stamps and used the money from my parents.
Did you ever obtain any of it suspiciously?
Suspiciously? Well, I did go on welfare. I went on food stamps when I was a student on the St. Hill Special Briefing course, even though I was getting $200 a month from my parents.
Okay, so there was some suspicion there.
And so I just put that money aside. Scientology wasn't as expensive then as it is now, so it didn't take me that long to save it up. I went the training route because I was very interested in being an auditor.
Were you aware if that was a common practice with others to get money?
Yes.
It was.
Yes, there were other people on course that were doing the same thing. I think I got the idea from some of them. Yeah, and that was... So I did that, and so I didn't have very many expenses.
But they say that they're an organization of integrity.
Mm-hmm.
If someone is lending you to believe that it's okay to compromise rules and regulations outside the group, I mean, how do you deal with that?
Well, I considered that anything was justified to the ends of clearing the planet. And my being trained as an auditor was going to save the planet, so I just didn't look at things like that at all.
Did you look at people...
I felt that the end justified the means.
Did you look at people on the outside as being of equal status to people on the inside?
Not at all.
Why not?
Not at all. These were wogs. Hubbard called non-Scientologists wogs, and wogs were in a trap, and we were always being told we were in a trap, and the only way to get out was Scientology. And we were just, the only way was through the tech. And
so would that mean anybody in even a high-up position in government or in business?
Oh, Scientology was very against the government because totally paranoid of it.
But yet I recently saw a book that had a lot of proclamations and certificates to show support for Ron Hubbard.
It's all PR.
Well,
Anything that'll give them good PR.
do you think that these people really knew what they were lending their support to?
I really don't know, because I wasn't involved in that part of Scientology. Like I said, I wasn't in the Guardian's office, and my area of knowledge was about the ship in Hubbard, and this is really away from my area of knowledge.
Okay. Going back to what you were talking about then.
Right. So, my goal was to get to the ship and be with Hubbard, and it was a single-minded goal. I got through my courses. I got through my clearing course. I got through OT3. I trained to Class 6.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all very exciting. I was thrilled to go clear.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I really got into the advanced courses the way some people did. I did them. I was really on a high the whole time. OT3 was a bit scary, but I got through it in like 2 weeks. I think I did it more superficially than most people did. I did feel the pressure sensations and all that, because they tell you you're possessed by spirits. Mm-hmm. By body thetans.
Why was it important to you to be where Hubbard was?
Well, because I felt he was the source. He was the originator of this incredible technology. And I wanted to be working right with him, because I felt that was where I could do the most.
Did you feel that he was some superior being on the planet?
Sure. I felt he was a genius.
Would you say that you could see him equal to, say, Jesus Christ or any of those?
I thought he was higher than Jesus Christ. The Class 8 course, which most people don't get to see the materials to, says that Jesus Christ on the cross is nothing more than an image from an implant. An implant in Scientology is a space opera sort of concept of where the spirit outside the body is overwhelmed by forces and ideas and mass put into there. It's hard to explain, because there's nothing like it. It's really bizarre science fiction type stuff.
And yet, what does he use as his evidence to prove it?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Just at that point, I believed whatever was given to me, and it was he said an incident happened to us all 75 million years ago, and there was this evil person, Xenu, and Thetans got packaged together, the whole bit, and then we were given a long implant that lasted 36 days, and he said Christ on the cross was a part of that implant. And so the only God I worshipped was L. Ron Hubbard. I considered him far superior to Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. He said he was the Messiah. He said he was a reincarnation of Buddha.
Did any of the other so-called masters in world religions ever come to him and ask for instruction?
Masters in world religion?
Like, would you say the Muhammad or Jesus or any of those would come to this reincarnated Buddha in any?
No, not Hubbard.
Yeah, was there something that was said that Jesus studied with Buddha? Something along those lines? You remember something to that effect?
Yeah, something like that Jesus studied Eastern religion. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I considered Hubbard far superior to all these people, really. He was it. Mm-hmm. He had invented the way out of the trap, which was much longer, which we had been in much longer than just the last 2,000 years. It was 75 million years.
So how is it that someone can make their way to work under him? It sounds like it's almost impossible to get there.
Well, I guess if you want something badly enough, I was very single-minded.
You were determined.
I was determined, and I joined staff at AOLA. It's the advanced organization that delivered the advanced courses.
And that's located?
And so I was immediately assigned to audit clears and OTs.
Where is that located?
Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the time it was in Los Angeles. Now it's in Hollywood. So I was on staff there, and I audited a woman in the Guardian's office who worked very closely with Mary Sue. And that auditing of her went really well. We had a good rapport. We just happened to really hit it off well.
Now, Mary Sue is
L. Ron Hubbard's wife.
His present wife?
Well, he's passed away, but yeah, up until his death.
Okay.
Yeah, at the time, his wife.
Okay.
She lived on the ship with Hubbard.
Okay.
And she invited me to come to Flag for training. I was the chosen one. I felt very elite. I had just joined staff there. I was selected out of all the auditors to come to train, and the idea would be I would return to LA to be their main tech person, their case supervisor. But I really wanted to stay on flag. I was just thrilled, though, with the whole idea of going to flag. I was really fun.
So how did others react when they heard that you were going to flag?
I didn't pay much attention.
You were just in your own little world.
Yeah, there was no issue there.
So how soon after that did you go?
Very soon, within a few days.
Oh, that quickly?
Yeah, I left, and so there wasn't much discussion with other people.
So where did you go to join flag? Where was it at that time?
Okay, well, what happened was I was given a briefing, first of all, saying the location of the ship was to be completely confidential. Not even my parents, nobody was to be told. The only way anybody could send mail to me was through the liaison office in New York.
Why all the secretiveness?
Well, because Hubbard was very paranoid that people would find him, people from the government, people from the IRS.
Why was he paranoid? What did he have to hide?
He felt everybody was after him.
Had he done anything illegal to your knowledge?
I didn't know at the time he had. I thought he was being persecuted, because he was such a great person, and there were suppressives, SPs. An SP is anybody who seeks to destroy or attack Scientology, an antisocial personality who wants nothing but death and destruction for mankind. Anybody that leaves Scientology is considered a suppressive. I am a suppressive person right now.
At least you're considered that.
Yeah.
You don't see yourself that way, do you?
No, I don't see myself as an antisocial personality. If the definition of suppressive is somebody that seeks to attack Scientology, then yes, by that definition I'm a suppressive person. But I don't see myself as wanting nothing but death and destruction for mankind. I want to help mankind.
Do you want
and
to
one
help
way I can help mankind is by exposing destructive cults like this one.
Okay. So is your motive by speaking here today to destroy Scientology?
My motive is to make people aware of what it's like to be a part of this group and how that is destructive to people, and that people should be aware that mind control techniques exist, and Scientology is one of many groups that use them, and to give this as an example for whatever group. If anybody sees any group using these techniques, they should get out. And my reality, my experience has been in Scientology, and so just to relate.
Is there any kind of circumstances that you would support if Scientology could survive?
Support.
For instance, to hear you talk now, you're saying that you want to reveal to people the destructive aspects of Scientology. Yes. But is there anything or any criteria that you would lay down for consideration that would allow Scientology to continue with your support?
No. There's nothing Scientology could do right now to redeem itself. It was created by a very psychotic man, and I would advise people to stay away from it.
So you think that the best thing would be to just have Scientology closed down altogether?
Oh, yes. Definitely. It's a cult. Scientology is a cult. It uses mind control techniques.
So how about the belief systems? Do you think that those are also bad?
Yes. Okay. I think it's destructive to say that reality doesn't exist, that there's no objective reality, that we all create our own reality, because that eliminates the whole idea of good and evil, because good and evil are simply what you create, whatever you want to create them to be. And so I'm in disagreement. Now, if somebody wants to have a certain philosophy, I'm not against it. If somebody wants to believe that something happened 75 million years ago and that's their religion, fine. But just don't use mind control techniques to force on people. Be upfront with people right away. Don't deceive them. Give all the information. If somebody had said, well, we're a religion and what we believe is that this incident occurred 75 million years ago and that your body is a cluster of has clusters of spirits and all that. If they'd told me that right up front, I would have said you guys are a bunch of kooks. But then if people wanted to practice it, I would say fine. as long as nobody told them if they left they would be declared suppressive. If they just said, well, this is our beliefs, you can take it or leave it. If you don't want to join our group, that's fine.
Well, isn't that what happened to you?
That's just simply not how they operate.
Isn't that what happened to you? I mean, eventually you heard those things, but is it such a big deal that they would reveal those things to you later instead of maybe in the beginning?
I think I had a right to know, because what happens is they have to prepare people for this, they say. And it's just complete indoctrination. They accept you because nobody would believe that story if they were told that in the beginning. But the first thing is you accept past lives, which a lot of people believe in, I suppose. It's not that far out of concept. And then you start running past lives. They tell you if you get a picture, go with it. Whatever picture you get in your mind. I was getting pictures. That was how I first started on past lives. This process
of running, you're talking about like visualizing it in your mind? Or?
Yeah, and I ran this on a lot of other people too. And the way we would handle them is if they couldn't run past lives, if they were blocked, we would tell them to go with whatever picture came to your mind. We would say, don't invalidate it. So I would get pictures, and then it came easily to me. And so once I accepted that concept, I could get all kinds of pictures of things. And after that, then I accepted the materials on the clearing course and all that, which dealt with implants. And then OT3 was just a very big implant. And it's not quite that simple. It's a lot of complicated doctrine, but it makes sense at the time. Once you get there, you believe it, because people walk in, the whole ritual of OT3 and going into the secret room where the secret materials, it's very hypnotic. I was in a trance state when I read the materials. I would have believed whatever was in front of me.
As you read that material, did it seem at all bizarre?
No. I mean, it seemed like it was incredible, but I don't know. I believed it.
And as you started the processes of that, I mean, was there any fear that came over you, or any kind of...
I was excited. I felt like I was ready to handle it, because they tell you that if you're ready to handle it, you can get through it. And Hubbard said he had gotten through it, so we could. And
so you went right through it?
I really took the whole thing. I really believed everything.
So you went through it?
And I felt like it was safe, because Hubbard had developed it for us, and he wouldn't let us do it if it wasn't safe. And I went through it, and I got the appropriate sensations and everything. And one time I thought I was in a little trouble, but I had total confidence my CS could handle me. I thought that I had left something undone or something. So I went into the CS and the case supervisor. But no, nothing earth-shattering. I joined the Sea Org about just a few weeks after I finished OT3.
Okay.
Yeah.
So up to this point, you're getting a lot of information, you're learning a lot of things that you're accepting. How do you feel? Do you feel like you could walk away if you wanted to?
I thought I could. I didn't know I was so indoctrinated. I didn't know that I was under mind control. I thought I could, and that I was choosing to stay there of my own free will. Like if somebody had questioned me, I would have said, no, I'm not brainwashed. I can leave any time I want.
By the time you took this course...
But it was a mental prison. That's the thing. I wasn't being physically restrained. But I had a picture of the WOG world as just simply horrible. Anything outside of Scientology, you were just in the mud.
You had been in the group how long by the time you took the OT3?
2 years. 2
years.
It was 1973.
Is that relatively standard for most people? They go through that quickly and come to that point? Or would you say that was part of your determination to get...
I got there pretty quickly. It varies. Some people get to OT3 in 1 year if they have the money to do it.
So
they
by
could
that
get
time,
through it, especially if they don't do the training route. But I was pretty zealous.
By that time, how much had you spent, do you think?
Oh, I don't know exactly. Maybe $5,000.
How much did that cost?
That's very cheap compared to what it costs now. This was before the prices went up, and I went the training route, which was the cheapest route. I paid $500 for the Dynetics course, $1,000 for the academy, $1,200 for the St. Hill Special Briefing course. These are all different levels of training. And I don't know, maybe more, maybe $6,000.
Okay, and today that might be 2 or 3 times that much?
Oh, a lot more. Yeah.
Okay.
Like I saw the price for the St. Hill Special Briefing course is over $12,000. The solo level's included now, but still, it was like $1,200 when I was in.
Oh wow.
So there's a big difference.
Inflation.
In prices. Yeah, so they say. Yeah.
Okay. So, up to this point, had you seen anything that made you suspicious of the group?
Yeah. I had seen things, but I shut them out.
Like what?
It always bothered me when somebody told me don't Q&A. That's another loaded term.
And it means?
It means questioning a person's answer. It means questioning, basically. And I had a bad gut feeling about that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't natter, too. That's another one. Nattering means any kind of criticism.
Mm-hmm.
If you're at all critical of anything, you're nattering, and that means this is like the main thought-stopping technique in Scientology is they tell you if you're critical at all of the group, it means you have overts and withholds. An overt is a harmful act, especially a harmful act against Scientology. It's like what the religious cults would call a sin.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a withhold is withholding the fact that you did it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Say
any
for
kind
instance,
of critical thoughts about the group, and I was indoctrinated because I had read a whole explanation of how this occurs and everything,
mm-hmm.
that I was indoctrinated to find my own overts and withholds. So I would immediately introvert and look at myself. Rather than looking outside where I should have been looking at the group, I looked at myself to find my own sins.
Mm-hmm.
And this got much worse when I was on the ship. This is what I really got into
Mm-hmm.
a lot. I had a complete emotional breakdown at one point.
Now,
But
these withholds and these overts that you're talking about, would they ever become knowledge within the group besides just what you knew? I mean, is there some process that you would have to relinquish these things?
I would have to tell it to my auditor.
So
That was standard practice, and I did it to other people. We were told that it would be kept strictly confidential, which was a lie, because I found out later by reading about court cases, that evidence that came out in court, that information from the pre-clear folders was used against other people, but I didn't personally witness that happening. The whole time I was in Scientology, I believed that data would be kept confidential.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
So this process of auditing then, in a sense, retrieves private information.
yes, everything is written down. They say for the purpose, because there's a third person supervising you and they have to know what's going on to know how to program it.
Mm-hmm.
But everything is written down as the pre-clear says.
Mm-hmm.
I had to keep full running records. I audited hundreds of people. Yeah, and I used this mind control technique on many other people too. If somebody started nattering, criticizing, I would have to pull their overts and withholds.
Say someone had parents, for instance, that were not real favorable to Scientology, but they were, say, living together or visiting at home, and their parents said to them, well, we think that this is a cult, and we're concerned about what you're involved in.
Oh, they'd have to be handled then. And if they weren't handled, then, well, disconnection was officially canceled as a policy, but the person would get the feeling that they should just keep their distance.
Well, for instance, if the person went back to the group and they had this kind of information provided by their families that would be somewhat negative toward the group, would the group ever know about this?
Oh, it would be instant ethics handling if that happened. If I came back and I said my parents had been presenting me with a lot of negative information and they had had somebody in to talk to me, they would have really, I would have had to really try to PR my parents.
Mm-hmm. What if you hadn't volunteered that you talked with your parents? Is there any way they could get it out of you?
Oh yes, in an auditing session, I fully believed that the e-meter would pick it up. And if I was getting audited myself, and even if I wasn't, I would feel so consumed with guilt that I wasn't telling. That's the cult of confession. It's one of Lifton's 8 criteria for mind control, and this is certainly another example.
Mm-hmm.
Scientology is very big on the loaded language and the cult of confession
Mm-hmm.
from the very beginning.
Now you're talking about the paradigm from Lifton's
Yes.
work
Yes, Lifton's 8 criteria for mind control.
from Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totemism.
Yes, and there could be no secrets in auditing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, we have a plane to catch, so I want to kind of be conscious of the time here.
I should get into the Sea Org more.
We have
what
about
went on
25
there.
minutes
Yeah.
that you can do that, so why don't you go ahead and get into those issues?
Okay, well, I joined the ship, and what I had expected to find there was a lot of really so-called OTs. And I expected happiness. I expected to see people that were really dedicated. What I saw was a lot of fear, a lot of terror. a lot of heavy discipline. And we were held up as flag auditors. We were going to be the ones to do it. We were the most valuable beings on the planet. Auditors are the most valuable beings on the planet. And a flag auditor is somebody who's been trained under Ron, under people. Like, that's just the most special thing in Scientology, is to be a top auditor or case supervisor. And so we were held up to very strict standards, which means, anywhere in Scientology really, it means that if you don't get the result on the pre-clear, first I should explain, after every session the pre-clear goes to another person, a third party called an examiner. And the examiner checks out the pre-clear on the meter, and 3 things have to be present to have the results of the session considered acceptable. There has to be a floating needle, which is a reaction on the e-meter that is supposed to indicate that the person is free of charge, which is another Scientology term, but the person is basically in a good state of mind.
Is this like
complete.
Electrical charge or spiritual
yes,
charge?
Yes, he believes that the mind is physical, that mental mass actually has a physical quality to it that can be measured on an e-meter.
Okay.
And that, well, it basically indicates that whatever was started in the session was complete.
Mm-hmm.
So he has to have a floating needle. He has to have very good indicators, VGIs, which means, he looks bright and happy, basically. And, well, those are the 2 things that have to be present at the exam. And at the end of the session, he has to have VGIs, very good indicators, floating needle, and a cognition of some kind about the process, which just means an insight.
Mm-hmm.
Some kind of realization, some kind of, oh yeah, so that's why, something like that.
Okay.
So if the pre-clear's needle wasn't flowing at the exam, the folder would be red tagged. And it's always assumed that if the process didn't get the results it was intended to get, it's never the process. Scientology always works. We had this drilled into us. Scientology technology is perfect for everybody. And it's always the auditor's fault if something goes wrong. I was completely responsible for my pre-clear state. So those were the standards we were held up to, absolute perfection. So if our results were less than perfect, well, first what they would do is they would send you to what's called cramming, which means you have to review the materials to find misunderstood words, because it's always that. Or it could also be the case supervisor goofing up, but it's always somebody else's goof other than Hubbard's, naturally. That's blasphemy.
Mm-hmm.
So it got to be very intense. We were told if we got any kind of result other than perfection, we had evil intentions. When Hubbard arrived back on the ship, he was away in 1973 of May when I first came. He was away, and he came back in September. Things intensified even more. I thought they were going to get better. I was really excited. But ethics got even harsher. Ethics is Scientology's disciplinary branch. And if we got into trouble, we were put into lower conditions, and we had to do our conditions, which I had to do many times, many conditions. But what they had, what was involved, which I understand came from Hubbard, even though some people would like to deny it, was an example of some of our discipline was the KaliI ceremony. This is something that's really bizarre.
What is that?
Well, they had a picture of the goddess KaliI, the goddess of death and destruction, Greek goddess, above an altar.
And where was this located?
This was in our internship classroom.
This is in Los Angeles again?
No, this was on flag with Hubbard.
Oh, on the flag?
Yeah, I was right now,
on the
at
Apollo?
this point I'm on the Apollo with Hubbard.
Okay.
Yeah, the headquarters of Scientology.
And so have you seen him at this point?
Yes, I would see him around the ship.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So
Yeah,
he's aware of all this that's going on.
I don't see how he could not have been. I think this was an LRH order. People justified it. Nobody felt good about the KaliI ceremonies, but it wasn't something that was spoken up, even though I did speak up on the ship. That was another thing, was I was considered a troublemaker because I felt such rage when I arrived on the ship and saw the atmosphere that existed of fear. I just felt such rage. I felt so betrayed, even though I couldn't verbalize it then. I couldn't mentally realize anything that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
But all I could do was feel this intense anger.
You were
It
young?
was like,
Were you young at that time? How old were you?
I was 20 by then.
20.
But it was like my mind was fighting for survival because I could instinctively feel I was in a trap. It was like a very, just a very gut level thing. That it's like when you trap an animal and they're just fighting as hard as they can to get out. That's what my mind was doing to try to break free of all this mind control. I was just fighting really hard, and I didn't understand what was going on with me. I was just very, very angry.
Or was depression a part of what you were feeling as well?
Not yet.
Not yet. Just anger.
Yeah, and I would express it like one night we were woken up at 12 o'clock, and there had been all these KaliI ceremonies, which, well, I should probably finish that first. We had to go before an altar in a candlelit room where all the interns sung Rock of Ages, but different words to the effect that we were worshippers of KaliI. We had to kneel before the altar and say we wanted to destroy our pre-clears, which is, wanting to destroy the pre-clears and wanting to destroy Scientology is like horrible, horrible. And we had to say that was what we wanted. We were given a knife and a mock pre-clear folder, which is the written records of our pre-clears, and told to stab it.
And what
to stab the pre-clear.
What was the significance of that?
Well, we were told that the reason we were making mistakes was that we were evil. We had evil intentions. And this was to sort of get it out. I guess it was supposed to be sort of a catharsis. Like when you really express your feelings, you're having a catharsis, and our feelings were evil intentions.
Were there anybody in there in these ceremonies that you can tell us of that are still in the group that have high positions?
KaliI, well, she's not still in the group. She's left since. But they had high positions, and a lot of people have left.
I see.
Yeah, there were some people on the RPF that had, but I'll get into that later. But I'll just get through this part of it.
We have about 20 minutes.
Okay. Well, I'll just tell you about this other thing that happened when I spoke up. So all this was going on. I was extremely angry. We were woken up one night at midnight to write letters to get public to come to the ship to get auditing, where we were supposed to really promote the ship in our letters. And promoting the ship was the last thing I was in the mood to do. I was pissed. I'd been in a sound sleep. They dragged us all out of bed. And I said, if I told people what it was really like on this ship, they wouldn't want to come here. And after I said it, I just went, oh my God. It was like total fear came over me because I knew that I was like, why did I say that? Why did I open my mouth? Because a part of me was extremely guilty about these critical thoughts because it meant I was a terrible criminal for having them. And KaliI was there, and she immediately assigned me an ethics condition of treason, which is, you have to do amends, which means you have to do menial work in your spare time, which spare time on the ship means your sleep time or your meal time. And it was very humiliating for me. I was outcast by the group. And you have to wear a red armband, all that stuff. So that's just one example where freedom of speech just simply was not allowed. And anger was not allowed. And it was coming out more and more.
So at this point, did you feel at all like a prisoner?
Yes. I felt very angry about what was going on, yet I didn't want to leave.
Do you think you could have?
Well, I could have escaped to the embassy and gotten them to call my parents. But I wasn't prepared to. That would have embarrassed Scientology, and I still believed in Scientology, and I kept telling myself, Hubbard doesn't really know about this. These are people who are misapplying Scientology. That was what I thought I was angry about, was that Scientology was being misapplied, and I was just terribly disappointed. And so I was getting into all this trouble. Even though my auditing, I was considered a good auditor. It was just when I got angry and at the people on the ship for the conditions that were going on, I would speak out against it. And I couldn't understand. I thought, what's wrong with me? I seem to be the only one that's not happy. I remember one evening just thinking this. I was looking at the other people thinking, they seem so happy, and I'm not happy, and what's wrong with me? I must have something in my, something that I've got to just really get rid of. I've got to get rid of this anger. So what happened was Hubbard put together a group called the RPF. And this was like built up for a month or so before he actually came out with who was going to be assigned to it.
Was this an acronym for something?
Yes, RPF stands for Rehabilitation. rehabilitation project for us. It's like 1984. Rehabilitation is slavery, actually, but it's a prison.
So it sounds like it's right out of the book that George Orwell wrote.
Yeah, you're supposed to be rehabilitated, and the way they help you is humiliate you. People had to dress in black boiler suits. We were not allowed to talk to anybody unless spoken to. We were to follow orders without question. We had to clean toilets. I'm getting ahead of myself by saying we. That this is RPFers. He issued a written bulletin. Everybody was just in shock and in total fear, because a person could be assigned to the RPF, first of all, for being a troublemaker or a backslider, but also simply for having a low score on a personality test or having a rock slam, which is a certain E-meter read that's supposed to indicate crimes. It's a wild, jerky motion of the E-meter needle. And so we were all in total fear, and it was just a horrible time for everybody. We just didn't know if we were going to be assigned. I was really scared, because even if I didn't have any rock slams in my folder, I had gotten into trouble enough that I really knew, but somehow I had hoped that somehow I wouldn't be assigned. So this was January 10th, 1974. I remember the date. The list came out, and sure enough, I was on it. We were told we could request a committee of evidence. And so I did that, even though there wasn't much hope. And in the meanwhile, I had started becoming close friends with Quentin Hubbard, L. Ron Hubbard's son, who was just really a delightful person.
And how old was he?
He was a year younger than me. He was 19 at the time. And we did our TRs, training routines, together. And we just, we had a really good time laughing together. He had a great sense of humor. I just always just felt very close to him. And it was very different from anything else going on the ship, because nobody else had a sense of humor about anything. And it sort of helped me, really, just to be able to have a friend like that. And friendships like that are very threatening to the group. And what happened was, when I got assigned to the RPF, they made Quentin Hubbard the chairman of my committee of evidence. And he had to convict me. He had to find me guilty. There was no other outcome. It was just understood. I had to be found guilty and remain in the RPF. A few days after the committee of evidence, Quentin Hubbard couldn't be found on the ship. A search party was sent out. He came back aboard the ship and told the messenger he had taken a bottle of pills, aspirin, I believe. He had tried to kill himself. And so Hubbard had his stomach pumped. He was in isolation in his room for about 3 weeks. When we would go to clean the toilets up where he was, I would see him. He looked pale and thin. He couldn't talk to anybody. I'm sure he was in a totally psychotic state at the time. And Hubbard was assigned to the RPF. Quentin Hubbard was assigned to the RPF by his father. His father just had no compassion for him. His mother, and he was very close to his mother.
But there was nothing she could do to help him.
No, she couldn't override Hubbard either. She was a victim of him too. So,
how do you see her today? Just as an aside, do you see her as having any input into the organization? Or?
No, I see her as his most unfortunate victim. She took the rap for him, even though she was involved in the FBI break-in, an IRS break-in case. She was involved, but she was under him. She took the rap for him.
Do you think she's a broken? Do you think she's a broken woman today?
Yes, she was in since she was 19. I just can't even imagine if the cult did what it did to me in 6 years. I can't even imagine what it would be like to be in the cult your whole life. I mean, it's just unbelievably horrible.
Yeah. So going back to Quentin.
Okay, so Quentin and I became really close when he was assigned to the RPF. When I saw him, he was very pale, very thin. And I decided that I would do everything I could to help him get through this. And so we helped each other, really. We supported each other. And we got through it. There was a lot of support in the group, a lot of empathy in the RPF for one another at the time. We really pulled together, and because of that, it sort of became a positive experience that we attributed to Hubbard. And that was wrong. It's like a concentration camp victim thanking Hitler for the camps because maybe there was some closeness among people in adversity. But we thanked Hubbard. And I know I felt like I had been rehabilitated. When I got out, I was on a real high for a while. I did very well in my auditing. I was assigned a case of somebody who had been my senior, meaning my boss, just a few months earlier, who had gotten into ethics trouble. And I hadn't gotten along with this person. Here I was, I had to audit him. And it was just like a situation when you're auditing a person, it's like being their therapist. You have to get them to trust you with their most personal things. And I did it. I felt really good that I was able to get a rapport going with him. He was really pleased with my auditing of him. He had a big personality test change, and the information got to Hubbard himself, and he issued a commendation. So this was like a real high for me. He said my auditing was an example of what flag auditing should be. It was like I was queen for a day. I was like the queen of the auditing world for a very short time, but it was like a real high. I was sent on a mission at the time to New York, which is an honor because you have a lot more freedom when you're on a mission. I stayed in a nice room at the Hotel Alden in New York. I was auditing the commanding officer there. It was just, I had a lot more freedom. It was a fun time for me. And Quentin and I were friendly. And then I got back to the ship from the mission. And this is when all hell broke loose. Quentin had been away on a vacation. When he came back, he told me he had tried to kill himself again. And there was a whole big thing that happened there. I won't go into it now because I know that we
don't have a lot of time.
Yeah. But what happened as a result of that, I don't think the powers that be, probably Hubbard. I still don't know exactly who was behind this. But I was ordered by the senior case supervisor, who was the person directly over me, David Mayo. David is a good person, too. That's why I don't think this order came directly from him. I think he was acting on orders from Hubbard. I was ordered to stop seeing Quentin. Quentin had confided the story in me. Nobody else knew except his mother. His family knew. That was it. And I was ordered to stop seeing him, and I got into a big fight with David Mayo. I refused. I questioned it. He said, "You're going to end up on the RPF again." And I just refused. I kept on seeing him. And so what happened was, at the time I was auditing on my Class 7 internship, and auditing hours that I made were invented. I was accused of things I didn't do. It was this whole big thing, and LRH personally canceled all my certificates, all my auditing. It was like losing everything. He sent me to the RPF a second time. And this time, there were no friends on the RPF. There wasn't Quentin. There was like nobody, and it wasn't easy to get out. The first time I got through it in about 4 months. This time, I was counting on getting through it again. And it was like April or May when I realized nothing was working out for me. My auditing partners, we had to audit each other on overts and withholds to get out. It wasn't working out with them. I was getting into a worse and worse state. At this time, I was really deteriorating emotionally. I was past the point of anger. I was just completely, I was just sad. I was crying. It was like a big loss. I felt like I had lost everything. And deep down, I knew that Scientology was a fraud, but I just wouldn't admit it. So, I went through this whole thing happened. I got sent to the RPF's RPF, which is even lower. I had to clean the bilges. Until finally, I snapped. I call it snapping. I read this book called Snapping, and I felt it really accurately described my experience, where my mind just went. And in a way, it was almost like a relief, because I didn't feel any pain anymore. Whereas before on the RPF, I would be going around clean, just crying constantly, and just all this anger and rage, and just horrendous. And it was like all the pain was gone, but so was all the joy. Everything was gone. I felt absolutely nothing. All of a sudden, I was just like really calm. I was just really zombied out. And I would just do whatever they wanted me to do. I stayed on the RPF pretty much until we moved to Florida, because we moved off the ship at the time. Hubbard sold the flagship.
This would have been about what year?
1975. And there were other things. I participated in photo shoots where Hubbard would go out and photograph people. He photographed people on the RPF. I was in several of those pictures.
And what type of things would happen Were they doctored up pictures?
Yeah, they were PR pictures mainly. Like one of them I got to star in, or they put all kinds of horrible makeup on my face, pale, grayish, and bags under the eye makeup, made me look horrible, then showed me getting audited, and then showed me all rosy-cheeked and happy. That was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I never saw how they were used, but he had just tons of pictures. Anyway, we finally moved to Clearwater. Maybe we should do a part 2 on this.
I'm sure we'll have to do that because
I should go. I really should give this more time in talking about the circumstances in which I left, because I think that would be very educational for people, because it shows how true it is that when a person is away from a mind control environment, things start to come back.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
Some things my parents did to help me that were really helpful. So we can go into that and Clearwater and the whole thing maybe another time.
Okay. Well, we have maybe 2 or 3 minutes left here before we have to leave.
Yeah.
Is there anything that's pressing that you'd like to say on this tape before we conclude?
Well, just that Scientology destroys real friendships. That's another thing I wanted to say about this Quentin issue, my friendship with Quentin. That I thought at the time they didn't want me to become sexually involved. I thought they were accusing me of nothing. We were never sexually involved. We were just very close friends, and maybe they thought we were, but that's not the issue. The issue is anybody that has a close friendship in Scientology is a threat, because close friendships bring out the real personality, the real desires. And in Scientology, they don't want you to be who you really are. They want you to be who the cult wants you to be, a Rondroid. And so my friendship with Quentin was a threat to that. And that's why it was destroyed, although it was never really destroyed, because Quentin and I kept in touch right up to the time of his suicide.
Which was when?
Within 2 weeks. He wrote, the last letter I got from him was October 12th, 1976. And it was later that month, I believe the 28th, that he went into a coma.
From an overdose of pills?
No, from carbon monoxide.
Oh, I see. That's how he took his life. How was, what do you think that L. Ron Hubbard's reaction to that was?
Well, I read Barefaced Messiah, who had the testimony of, I believe, Kimma Douglas. And according to what I read in that book, it was nothing but anger.
Because it made him look bad?
Yeah. Mary Sue was devastated, which I believe, because I saw a lot of genuine closeness there. But L. Ron Hubbard, his reaction was anger, according to. I was way out of Scientology then.
Yeah.
Quentin continued to write to me even after I was out.
Well, I think at this point, without saying we're grateful for what you've had to say here, but unfortunately we do have to catch a flight, so
Right.
I think what we'll do is we'll go off the air.
Okay.